our little honeydews, and welcome back to Sippin N Bitchin, where the drinks are icy and the book talk is spicy. This is episode 5, part 2. We're your main bitches. I'm Sam.
And I'm Steph, and we are jumping right back in to the War of Two Queens. Listen, that was a dive, not like a jump, but like here we are. We're sitting in chairs.
Diving in head
That's how
first.
it's gonna go. So last part 1 ended through chapter 14. So now the Craven are lurky lurking. And we're going into chapter 15 now. Where uh Poppy's like literally she's really reminiscent about Victor in this book, or like these
Yeah.
last few chapters. And so she's like wondering about the mist, like it had to be more than just a shield that cloaked the Craven kind of vibe, and she was just like, I can't think of this right now. So
I
and
got craving to kill.
yeah, got Craven to kill, but the one of the Wolven, Arden, lunges forward, takes off into the mist, and like she screams no, it's too late. The mist swallows him, and like
Oh, dum dum.
this is so tragic. And so um they're like fighting the Craven, going through the mist, and Poppy sees Delano, and she shudders as Delano turns, nudging Arden's paw with a whimper. Anguish built in her throat, tart and tangy. It came from them, it came from me, as the fur thinned out and pale, blood-streaked skin appeared. Arden returned to his mortal form. And of course, she cannot heal those of two worlds.
Even though she tried.
Another thing that solidifies, like, shit, what's gonna happen? I don't want to lose Delano. I don't want to lose Kieran. I don't like the more morality,
Yeah.
mortality, more whatever of it all.
Mortality, yeah. And I think it's also like the first time she's felt like a cap on her power. Like she's been able to just keep going and going, and here's something that actually stops her for the first
Yeah,
time.
and like something that she wishes she could help, but she can't.
Mm-hmm.
So then they're going through this whole tunnel system, whatever,
Find them
and
ascended.
yeah, find them and bring them to me. Um, and they're just talking about the ascended, and Valen goes, I believe they abandoned the city, and they've checked all the chambers and the homes near the interiors of the rise, and they're being searched to see if any are underground, but they all think that they left. But then Valen goes, what I can only imagine to be a message is something that they found, and it's in the chamber at the end of the left hall. And he goes, I don't believe you want to see it. And Poppy goes, but I need to. And so they're going into this chamber, and Kieran goes rigid beside Poppy as Delano presses against her legs. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think or feel anything but the stirring ether, the simmering rage. These people, these girls. I pressed a shaky hand to my mouth as I saw the words on the wall behind them, lit by rows of candles, words written in dried, rusty-colored blood. All you will liberate is death. The hand of one of the girls twitched. Oh, anyway, this is a really intense scene, and
Just hanging from the ceiling. No big deal.
it's really impactful. And Emil goes, we'll cover their bodies and then make it quick. They will soon find peace. And all Poppy can do is say thank you, because she is so distraught by this quote unquote message. And Delano asks Poppy, like, looks at Poppy and is like, Poppy, and she's like, I'm okay. And when in reality she felt nothing. And Kieran even calls her out and says, why did you lie to him? And she's like, what do you mean? And Kieran's like, Poppy. And she just goes, I'll be okay. And I think that is
Mood.
really, like, you don't always have to be okay with me kind of thing. Like, I think that this is one of those moments where she just is trying to grin and bear it and be strong for everyone.
Yeah.
Um, and she goes to Valen and she says, the Blood Queen spoke of the true crown in her summonses. Who do you think she would believe to be the true king? I will say we go through this back and forth of like, who's the true king, who's the true king, and I'm really surprised that nobody like puts this together, I guess.
To be
I don't
fair,
know.
they just learned who he was, so I don't think that's gonna be the first thing on their mind.
Yeah, I know, but there's some old ass people in this book. I just feel like someone should know. But
Reaver.
Valen says, Malik and,
Yeah, they think he's the true king that they're referencing.
correct. And, Poppy's asking what do you know about how Alana, entombed Malik? And he says she used old magic. What kind exactly, I don't know, and bone chains.
Gross.
Um, Nyctos had created the method of incapacitating any being that carried ether in them, bestowing the bones of dead deities with such power. I didn't need to think hard to remember what they had felt like digging into my skin. The only way he could have escaped them is if someone removed them. And like, that's not ominous at all. Um,
Oh, the temple.
yeah. And ascended serve in the temples, serve the true king. I don't like Vermont either, dude. Like
No, no.
these are priestesses and priests and stuff hidden
Don't like any of them.
in this what's it called? Chamber? Are we calling it a chamber? We're gonna say
I think they're
chamber.
in the temple right now.
Temple?
Yeah, they
Temple
haven't gone back
chamber.
to the chamber yet.
Um and uh Poppy goes, "Who all knew the Ascended were among you?" And he goes, "Only the trusted, only the crown." And so the Duchess would have known. She comes to the realization that the Duchess would have known they were part of the crown. And um there's a priestess Vanetta had a grip on, stumbled forward into a beam of sunlight. The woman shrieked, jerking back. Faint smoke wafted from her robes, and the scent of burnt flesh hit the air. And she goes, "What? I tripped." And Poppy stares at her, and Vanetta sighs. She tried to bite me more than once. Um, and then a female priestess speaks up and says, "I'll show you. I'll take you to them."
Kids.
Um, and that's crazy. So then we go into chapter 16. Um, Kieran goes, "If this is some sort of trap, you won't like what happens." And she goes, "It's not." And Poppy's like, "Why would you agree to take us?" And she's like, "Because it's time." And I'm like, "What does that even mean?"
Mm.
Um, like
Time for
this,
what? Let's be
well,
specific, please.
um, and so, um, and then Emil, with his comedic relief, goes, "If I were to create a word out of thin air, I would choose something more interesting." Because he says more interesting than stalactites.
Lactites.
Listen, listen. I don't know words anymore.
Fair.
Um, and they're talking about the carving jagged formations of the ceiling, depositing what appeared to be some sort of reddish mineral all along the spiraling and bizarre formation stretching down. I mean, that
Mm.
sounds like a mineral name. Listen, it's not.
Yeah. Aren't stalactites basically just
Don't ask
when
me. I
you're
don't
in
know
a
words.
cave, like it looks like drippings that have like frozen almost in the stone?
Like the
Like,
caverns in Virginia? Like
yeah.
the what's it called? Luray Caverns? I've been there
Sure.
once. Sure.
Yeah. We'll Google this later.
Yeah, we will Google this later. It's fine. Um, so ew. Sorry, I'm just reading these notes. The priestess quickly
Your
places a
notes.
torch. No, these are yours.
Oh yeah. I forgot
The
this is where mine
priestess
started.
quietly placed the torch into the holder jutting from the wall and then clasped her hands loosely at the waist. They have all served a great purpose. Slowly, almost painfully, I turned to her. The ether pulsed in my chest and swelled, pressing beyond me and brushing against the walls. The air thickened as if filled with choking smoke, but there was no fire. Mind you, they're looking at pale, bloodless limbs, some long ago and some so tiny. The piles of faded clothing, some white and some red, barely holding together, dried out husks where patches of hair remained, and legs and arms curled, withered. Some dropped side by side in the ceremonial red of the right, their clothing fresh, their decay not even begun to take hold. Dimly, I wondered how there could be no smell. Perhaps it was the cold of something else. That
Hmm.
disgusting. And Poppy just goes, give her what she so eagerly awaits because she like feels senses her sense of peace. She tastes it from her, soft and airy like sponge cake. I mean, I want some sponge cake, not gonna lie. I don't
Not
want
after
sex, but
seeing that, I don't. Mm.
well, that's also true. Um,
Give it to her.
and uh and Poppy's like, "Is that all of them?" Valen goes, "The temple is empty." Oh, it is a temple.
Yeah.
Um, and Kieran goes, 71. There are 71 that are, and like it goes unsaid, but fresh. 71 that must have taken in the unexpected last rite and the one before. That number had to include the second and third sons and daughters, which meant none had been given over to the court, as was normal for the second born. It also meant that those who carried that not so dormant ember of life had been slaughtered.
So they didn't care like who they were. They were all just
Yeah, McMurdering people.
yeah.
Um, and something just as the priest, like she is going to she goes back to the priests and priestesses clothed in white, and she's like, put them on their knees. And Valen goes, you don't have to. And Poppy reiterates again, I will not ask any of you to do what I would not do myself. And she says, open your eyes, look at them. All of you look at them, not at me, at them. And they weren't filled with anything. He stared at them and smiled. And just, I don't
There's something
understand.
very cinematic about that
Yes.
happening, and in the background, Reaver's just burning the shit out of the temple.
Yep. And so she slices their throats and well,
It's on.
smiling at especially the smiling Vermont. I cannot believe he smiled. Like sick people in this world.
Ugh. It gives me the literal like ick and creeps, and I'm just like, I want to be sick thinking about that.
Yep. And then she her job's not done. She spends her time and she heals those who she can. Um like she wants to just be useful. And Sage makes like notes that she looks really tired, honestly, mood. And Bobby goes, it's been a long day.
Right?
I'm like, yeah. Um, and then
Enter Reaver.
oh, we love Reaver. Um, walking through the hall was a tall blonde wearing what appeared to be a sheet, knotted at the hips, barely knotted. With each long leg step, the sheet appeared mere inches from slipping away. And Sage just goes, "That's the Draken? Yum." And Niall goes, "He can breathe fire." And she goes, "And that's a bad thing."
Honestly, same.
And Sage is like, "I have absolutely no problem with nudity. Just thought I'd share."
Reaver grinned at that. I love that so much.
So then Reaver and Poppy are having conversations, and he goes, people always die, especially in war. And she says that doesn't make it any easier. And he goes, it just makes it what it is. Um, And she goes, I tried to bring Arden back to life. And Reaver goes, I told you it wouldn't work on anyone of two worlds. And she said, I had to. And he finishes for her, you had to try anyway. She doesn't like limitations either. And she goes, and Poppy goes, who? And Reaver says, the consort. Um, and he says, and she says, I'm guessing the primal of life probably isn't thrilled with me restoring life, huh? And Reaver laughs. This sounds so hoarse and untried. And he says, Nyktos would be conflicted over your actions. On one hand, he would never not be happy about a renewal of life. On the other, he would worry about the nature of things, the course of life and death, and how such an intervention alters the balance, the fairness. When it comes to the consort and choice to act or not, she would weigh the concerns, toss them aside, hope no one was paying attention, and just do it. Sound familiar?
At
And
that girl.
Poppy goes, no. Why does the consort sleep so deeply when Nyktos doesn't? And Reaver says it's the only way to stop her. And I'm very
Dun
interested
dun
to find out
dun.
why.
Well, I mean, they kind of go into it in chapter 17 because Poppy does say, like, stop her from what? And he says, from doing something she'd regret. Both of her sons were taken from her. Neither may be dead, but neither are really alive, are they? She's angry, furious enough to forget who she is, enough to cause the kind of harm that cannot be undone. Sound familiar, Poppy? Does it?
No. I don't know
No,
what you're
not at
talking
all.
about.
No. But they kind of talk about that, and then Kieran comes in and they get into this whole like they do their little back and forth dance. He's criticizing what Reaver's not wearing. And then Poppy's like, that's why we need to give him clothing. And there's like, you expect me to wear his clothing. And then they're going back and forth about like, you're a twig, I'm not. And Kieran's like, I'm not a twig. Like, and Poppy's like, y'all are the same size. And it's just
Why
this
are we
whole
arguing about
thing.
this right now?
And so Poppy, like getting tired of this, goes, I ate a lot of ham. A lot. You'd be proud. And he's like, that's random. And she's like, yeah, I feel like being random. And I don't blame her. I would have like said whatever I could too. Um and he's like, aren't you supposed to be doing something? And he's like what? And he's like, clearly anything that doesn't include sitting in nothing but a sheet and eating an apple. And he goes, so not much then?
Mood.
And she's kind of like, I get it, you guys are having a fight, he almost bit your hand, you almost stepped on his tail. And Reaver's like, he almost stepped on my entire leg, not my tail. And Kieran goes, he almost bit my arm off, not my hand. And I'm just like, boys. And then we find out Perry got hurt and that he came to see if she was willing to heal him because Perry wasn't even supposed to be there. They left him back in the scene, but he did a little sneaky stink. And it was to fight, but I think it was also because he wanted to be close to Delano, which I think is sweet. Yeah. And then she's like, okay, we'll go free him. And Reaver tattles on Poppy like they're about to leave. And he's like, oh, by the way, she was dizzy. And it's kind of like, thank you. Thank you for that, Reaver. Because now Kieran's like all worried about him. And she's like, nope, we're doing this. Goodbye. They go there, find Kieran, find a Delano and Perry. And she heals him and find out what's our favorite book in a book that gets brought up in this series.
Couldn't tell you. The Prophecy is our favorite book within a book.
No. It's Miss Willa's diary, guys. It's back.
No, it's a book Perry found.
Oh yeah, it's a book Perry found in the ship cabin you and Cass stayed in, actually. And she automatically knows what it is. And I like how Kieran's like, you brought that on the ship with you? And she's like, nope, it was Castile. And he's like, likely story. But she heals him and Delano's relieved to see him healed. And she can feel the love on each other, like when they embrace, like she gets that chocolate and berries taste, that love taste. And I love our gay couple so much.
I love all of the couples, to be honest.
Really, I do too. And then she's back to not being able to sleep. She's doing a lot of thinking about like what she's capable of doing. Could she be like bitch? Like the loss of her son and her heartmate, could that have done it? Like she's trying to figure out, like, I guess justify, like, how could this have happened? And she said, my throat dried as I held Castile's ring tighter. Could I be oh gosh, I pressed the button. Could I become like her if something happened to Castile? If he were killed, would I become nothing more than wrath and poison that only liberated death? And then she realized she'd already been close to that. So that's a hard internal struggle to have, of like, you want to do good, but you're thinking like, I've already almost become this. It's not unlikely that it could full on happen. And she says, what terrified me more was the knowledge that I could become something far worse than what her mother is.
She powerful, so it's possible.
Yeah. And then there's a very handsome man who went back into his mortal form and like put his arms around her and held her close, and I just love a Kieran spooning moment, like, it's so sweet, and other things in my mind, but, like, she's having this foreboding thought, and so she tells Kieran, she's like, "I need you to promise me something." And essentially she's saying, like, "If something happens, if Castile doesn't make it out," and he's trying to tell her that won't happen. She's like, "Even if it does, I could lose myself. If I become something capable of the kind of devastation we saw yesterday." And he's trying to be like, "You won't do that." And she's like, "What I said about feeling less mortal with each day, I wasn't lying. There's like this line inside of me that once crossed makes me something else. I've done it before at the Chamber of Nyctos. I could have destroyed Scion's Cove. I could have destroyed Oak Ambler when I woke to find Castile taken. I wanted to." And she says, "I need you to put me in the ground. Castile won't be able to do it. You know that. He can't. I need you to stop me. You know how. There are the bone chains." And he's like, "I know where they are. Like, don't even continue that sentence." She says, "And if we haven't discovered all that Elena did to entomb Malik, you need to find out. Put me in the ground and do whatever she did. Castile will be angry with you, but he'll understand eventually." She says, "I can't become something capable of leveling cities. I couldn't live with myself. You know that. You couldn't live with allowing me to become that. Neither could Castile. Maybe that will never happen. I will do everything I can not to let it, but if it does, you would be doing the right thing. You know that. You would be doing the thing that needed to be done." And he
Dun,
hates
dun,
it,
dun.
but he says, "I will do it. I will stop you." It's like, oh, he will do it. And then it goes into chapter 18. They're talking about like what to do for already, holy shit. They're talking about what to do for uh the people of Oak Ambler. Some of them want to leave because they're scared. They want to be closer to family. And some of them are saying, like, I understand that they don't want to let them leave, not because they want to hold them there, but because they're going to be at more danger because of the Craven if they leave, and they're trying to think of like their safety. And she says, "I understand the hesitation to allow this. I would rather no one choose to leave because of the dangers that it incurs, but if we prevent that, they have no reason to believe that it would be temporary or that we have no intention of continuing to suppress their rights, because we learned that the Ascended, they had to get permission from them to leave, and it was almost never granted." And so
Exactly.
she's saying, "We got to let them do it. This is how we gain the trust of the people in Solus, to show them that we're not captive captive we're not holding them captive here. They're free to make decisions that they need to make." And Valen says that he tells her, "My son is truly lucky to have found you." And I love that. I love that so much. He's a real father-in-law. Like, he's the realest one.
I think, which is funny because the progression of their relationship, it wasn't like when they first met, it wasn't under the best of circumstances. And it also like knowing Castile's original plans and like the evolution of how he really came to terms with this woman is now a part of my family, and how blessed and how happy I am to have her as my queen leading my people kind of thing. I think
Mhm.
that's a beautiful kind of, and we see this a lot, at least right now, we see it a lot more with Valen than we ever
Yeah.
do with Castiel's mom. Like, she's low key the cause of all this shit, but like Valen is on the front lines, like with her witnessing her growth.
Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful, like beautiful
It's a
evolution.
very beautiful progression. And I think that says something about their family too. They know how they raise their sons. And so
Hmm.
they trust them. And I just, yeah, I agree. It's a beautiful thing to see. And we haven't gotten to see that from the queen because she's not as prominent in the
She's
books
not here
as
yet.
Valen is. Yeah. So I'm interested to see like that relationship in the book coming out. It's gonna be interesting. But she goes to talk to the people of Atlantia. Um, she didn't wear the crown because she says, "I'm not their queen." So there's no point in doing it. But she told the people of Atlantia what she told the generals, that we are not conquerors, we are not takers, we're here to end the blood crown and the right. And I think that's going to hit for these people a lot more now that they've seen what happened to the children in the right and what really happened. like learning what happened to your children and then having these people say we're here to like end them, I would be like, hell yeah, do it, go. Like um so yeah. So after doing that, they're confirming all their plans. Poppy's doing what Poppy does, and she's pacing around. Um, and they're trying to figure out like their plans for going to get Castile. They're talking about like all the stuff they know. And she's just kind of like, I don't know. I don't know if it's her or Malik or if this is all just nonsense. I don't know how any of that plays into why they had another right or why she created the revenants or how any of them believe I play a role in this. None of them can seriously think I'll go along with her plans. Yes, as Steph is making, if you see our notes, Steph is making Taylor Swift references, and I had to call her out on that because she literally just highlighted the word Fortnite and put a note on it saying teehee.
I have no regrets.
I know you don't. But I love that Valen's out here reassuring her again. He says, I want to make you a promise. I will make sure your wishes are carried out on our end. The regent will have no issues from any of the generals, so Veneta. We will not take down any rises. We will not be the cause of innocents losing their lives. And that reassurance is just like, I can trust him.
I think it's also interesting considering, I mean, maybe this isn't accurate to say, but with Kieran and Cass being so close, you would think Veneta, not as close because she's like the younger sibling, but I would think that their families are very, very close. So in my head, Valen would view her as like a daughter
Right.
kind of vibe. So the fact that he like respects her and her title enough to say like we're going to make sure this gets done, I think that that's very impactful as well.
Yeah. I think he's going to protect Veneta and her title and stand up with her as much as he does Poppy.
Slay.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with that. And we love that. We love that about him. We love a reassuring man. And we love a team with no plan. Because that's really what they are. Because they're like, we know how we can get in there, but after that, we don't know what we're doing. You're just faking it till we make it, man. That's another. Yeah. Anyways. Gotta fake it till you make it, and I did. Anyways, then she realizes like we need to figure out a way to see him, and the thought of magic comes into her head. And she's like, oh my gosh, why did I not think of this before? And she's off to find Sven and talk to him about primal magic. And he's trying to like remember the spells that he knows, and she's going back to her pacing. And Kieran puts a hand on her and stops her. So she starts like rocking back and forth on her heels. And I'm like, my God, we gotta fidget. You gotta let us fidget. That's how we think. But he keeps coming back to the spell of to locate a lost item. And he says that it was written to find what was once cherished, to locate what is needed. It doesn't specify that it has to be an object. Because he talked about how he almost did it to find cufflinks, but then was like, nah, I'm not messing with an array like that. And then he's like, but a person could be cherished and needed as well.
Correct.
And so he remembers that the spell is simple. All you need, it's very simple. You just need paper or parchment to write upon, the blood the item belonged to, so Castile's blood. But in this case, it would be Poppy's blood because she fed from him. So they discern that that will work. And another cherished item belonging to the same person. And they're kind of like, well, Poppy, well, no, she doesn't belong to him. It's like, that won't work. But then she remembers she has the rocking horse that Malik made him. And we also learned that he made one for Kieran too, around the same time. And I'm like, that is the sweetest thing ever.
I think we now need wooden figures. Me and you. That'd be so cute. Anyway, sorry.
I'll
that's
make you
not
one. You make me one. Anyways, don't mind our sidetrack to our real life relationship. It's okay. But yeah, she remembers that she has that, and it should work. They learn that you have to be like, it doesn't work far away. You have to be relatively close, yeah, for it to be able to track them. So that gives them some reassurance of we have something we can use So our plan isn't completely nothing. It's like now we have something to hold on to. But before they can keep going forward with this, they find out that someone from Atlantia has showed up to see them. And they're like, who from Atlantia was coming to see us? This is odd. They go out, and first you see Gianna, who is Alistair's great niece, who was supposed to marry uh Castile.
Castile?
Yeah. So it's kind of like, what's she doing here? But there's someone else with her. And it says, when the one who walked with her lowered the hood of the cloak, all the air went out of my lungs at the sight of rich, warm brown skin and the mass of tight, snow white curls. Holy shit, Kieran muttered. My heart stuttered and sped up as I stumbled away from Kieran. Tawny?
Our favorite. Well,
Love a
not our favorite
reunion.
duo, but they are BFFs. So into chapter 19, Tawny, they both recognize each other. They hug, they love, the emotions. They I miss you. I miss you too. What's going on? And Tawny uh anyway, talking about Tawny's eyes, and Tawny's like, "My eyes? Have you seen the glow behind your eyes?" And Poppy's like, "Yeah, mine are different. It's the primal essence." And Tawny's like, "I know what that is." And Gianna's or Poppy's like, "How? Did someone tell you about them, about the essence?" And Tawny's like, "Yes and no." And she goes, "And my eyes, my hair, I don't really know why any of it is like that. I'm guessing the shadow stone, but I can see fine, I can feel fine." Um, she says, "I feel so much better now that I'm here, even though he looks like he wants to eat me and not in a fun way," talking about Delano. We love him. Um, and Poppy's just telling Tawny that the Wolven are really protective. And Tawny goes, "There's something I need to tell you in private. It has to do with Victor." And Poppy's like, "Victor?" And Tawny goes, "I saw him."
Which, oh, the shock of that was like, I'm sorry, step back, rewind. What now?
And then so Tawny's like talking about this experience she had with Victor. She says, "I know that doesn't make sense, but I felt like I was dying. I knew I was dying until I saw Victor. I think either he or the fates did something to protect that." Um, and then there's this whole big story of Victor, catching Tawny up to speed, things that Tawny didn't even know to prove that it was him. Like a story about a god who had awakened long enough to prevent you from being harmed in the Skotos Mountains. He said that your suspicions were correct, that it was Ios who stopped you. He also told me it wasn't just Niktos who gave his approval for your marriage, that it was him and the consort. And then Tawny goes, "I also approve, not that anyone asks." And then Tawny tells Poppy that Victor was a victor. A victor is born with a goal to guard someone the fates believe is destined to bring about great change or purpose.
Where have we heard about Victor before?
Um, and Tawny also asks like that Victor also told her that Castile was taken, and Poppy's like, "Yeah, we're going to travel to Carcedonia to free him." And Poppy's like, "I know, Victor said you would," and like this is kind of crazy. And then she gives like a whole like background on Victor's and talk about Mount Lotho, which is where the Ares reside, um, where they wait to be reborn. It's a place written to be in Elysium. Um, and then they go into whole how they're reborn and all that stuff. Um, and then it's confirmed that Ian told her that Cora and Leo were his parents, and that it doesn't mean that they were in love, obviously, but there was definitely something there. And I don't think being a victor means you can't love, which, love is important.
Yeah. And I think that's always
Um,
been Poppy's biggest worry is that she always believed in the love her parents had. So she's always wanted to hold on to that. So knowing
exactly.
that he knew he was a victor and found her, she was worried about that. But ultimately, she's like, I'm going to believe that they were in love. Like, I'm going to hold on to that. And I like that she chose to hold on to that.
Me too. And then Tawny tells Poppy that like Victor looked so good and he wanted her to know that he was proud of her.
Oh,
And then Tawny talks about the prophecy that we learned in the prequel.
the big
Uh,
ass prophecy. That's where they learn it all.
Yeah, I don't really feel like I need to read this whole last thing over
Mm.
again. Um, but I will note that, um, there are so many little things that we don't pick up on, and by the end, it's like, "Oh, shit. It was literally right in front of me, and I didn't notice," kinda vibe.
Yeah.
Um, and so then Tawny and Poppy have a little bit of girl time, and Tawny's also like, "Why is it that he behaves as I would expect from your husband in terms of Kieran?" And, Poppy's just like,
Mm.
"He's a close friend, but not like that." Um, so essentially Tawny tells Poppy that Victor told me why no one was allowed to know the consort's name and why those who did were not allowed to repeat it in the mortal realm. Victor said that her name is power and that to speak it is to bring the stars from the skies and topple the mountains into the sea. Huh. I wonder where we heard that before.
Mm.
But only when spoken by the one born as she and of a great primal power. And Poppy goes, "I'm not a primal." Um, and Tanya goes, "I don't know. I wish Victor could have told me more, but he told me this. He told me you already knew her name."
Do
Um,
do do do.
so then this chapter kind of wraps up with them heading out to Carcedonia and saying goodbye. And Poppy promises to be safe, and Tawny says, "As careful as you were when we snuck out of the out of Castle Tierman and would go swimming as naked as the day we were born." And Poppy says, "You've always been a great friend to me, Tawny. I hope you know that. I hope you know how much I love you." And Tawny goes, "I know. I've always known."
Mm.
And then Delano gave the best hugs. You're not wrong. I want a hug from Delano. Um, but the chapter ends with Poppy saying, "A part of me would remain in the still smoking ash of the Temple of Theon, charred and ruined," because she's so impacted by the events that unfolded there.
Well, she
Um,
wouldn't be.
honestly. And then we go into chapter 20, which is another Castile POV to start. We're back in Soul Walking Land, and Cass seems to be alone in the cavern, thinking about his love for Poppy. Um, to deserve someone like Poppy, someone so incredibly strong, so curious and intelligent, and unbelievably kind, someone who deserved another as equally good as her, that wasn't me. My eyes closed as my chest clenched. That would never be me. I knew that, had always known that from the moment I realized who I had under me at the Red Pearl. I love that the whole full circle moment.
Yeah.
Um, she claimed me and she kept me even after knowing what I was, who I was, and what I'd done. She loved me. A better man, one not steeped in the kind of blood I was, would have walked away, would have left her to find someone good and deserving. But I wasn't that kind of man, and honestly, we're
And
thankful
thank
for it, Cass.
God.
So then Poppy shows up, they catch up on things.
They're
Uh
soul walking again.
yeah, and they're talking about like him being captive, she's at war, who has it worst off. And she goes, "I think you'll like Reaver, or maybe not. He tried to bite Kieran." And Cass goes, "A dragon tried to bite Kieran? My Kieran?" And she said, "Yeah, but at this point, if Reaver tries to bite him again, Kieran has it coming. All of it is a long story." Um, Castile also just wants to protect her and not tell her where he is, but knows that he has to. Um, and then they have cute time.
You
Um,
just don't want to read what I put in my note.
no, ma'am. Um, and then Cass, before they go, tells Poppy that Isbitch is a demis, and then he says to ask Kieran or Reaver, the dragon must be old, he may know what her weakness is. And Poppy goes, "She also learned how to harness primal energy. I don't know now if it's because of what she is or something Malik told her, but be careful, that magic is what killed the dragon." And then we switch to Poppy's point of view, and she shares that to Kieran and Reaver about the Blood Queen being a demis. And Reaver's like, "They're rare, but they're real, and I've never seen one." Explains what it is. And the weaknesses are believed to be the same as the gods. Are they? I guess we'll find out. Kieran's asking about Castile. The Craven then show up again, and we learn this is not something we learn. We already know Reaver's cranky when woken up. Um, And
No, we know
Reaver's
he's
like,
cranky, but this is him being woken up being cranky.
and Reaver's like, for fuck's sake, I got this. And uh and Kieran's like, what does he think he's gonna do, buck ass Nate? And he doesn't even finish his sentence. And Reaver shifts into his dragon form, and silvery white fire lights up the night, cutting through the darkness and the gathering Craven. And then, interesting enough, in the same chapter, we go back to Castile,
Mhm.
and the bitch queen and golden boy are there, and we hate them. And then he kind of gets his bitch to talk about um Poppy's dad, a large gray cat kept in the cage. And she's like, when did you see that? And he's like, oh, when I was touring Castle Red Rock. And was anyone else sightseeing with you? Um,
Yes.
a- and um, he's like, but it must be old if it's the same one Poppy spoke of, the one she saw as a child. And Isbeth went completely still. She once told me she saw it under Wayfair Castle. And Isbeth goes, Penelope was a curious child. Um, and then Castile stabs a bitch in the chest, barely missing her heart, but we love to see it. Um, and I fucking hate Callum, and every time I have to say his name, it makes me
Mhm.
really upset. Um, and Callum's just like, God, they're doing like a whole struggle hug, and Callum's like, God's he's still strong. And his bitch goes, of course he is. He's of the elemental bloodline. They are always strong. Fighters. No other bloodline would have been brave nor idiotic enough to stab me, even when they're mere hours from becoming nothing more than a blood-starved animal. And I bet he also has the blood of my daughter in him. I mean, no need to get all up in their
Sounds
business.
kinky, man.
Um, and she's like, I wonder how much you even know about primals. I must admit, I knew very little myself. If it weren't for my Malik, I never would have learned the truth. I never would have known that a primal could be born to the mortal realm. And he's all like, a primal born to the mortal realm? An ember of primal life that could only ignite in the female lineage of the primal of life. Poppy, cough, 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 cough. Um,
What? I like that he caught on to that real quick though. Like he's captivated. He's like almost at bloodlust, but he's keeping up quicker than anyone else is.
that's also true. And Castile is really struggling with his hunger for
Yeah.
blood.
Yeah,
Bitch.
he is. And then
That's
chapter 21. What?
one. Nothing. I was gonna say, she really just gave him just enough blood to like
Mm-hmm.
teeter him on the edge, and that's some fucked
Yeah.
shit.
She's edging him along.
Not in a good
We're
way.
we're back to Poppy's point of view. She's kind of on her watch right now. Everyone else is sleeping. And she's thinking she's starting to feel some things. She's feeling restless, hungry again, even though she's eaten, thirsty, just normal signs. Anyways, this is one point that I put in there, like she was talking about how she's glad that like she's on her menstrual cycle, and I'm like, can you imagine what that's like for girls in this time having to deal with
Terrible.
that? I eh. I hate thinking of how we have to deal with it now. So thinking of how they had to deal with that then, that must have been a
Terrible.
nightmare. Yeah.
Correct.
But she's doing her watch, and like there's a sudden like heavy press of awareness, like her throbbing chest. She can feel like the essence in her. I should have said the essence before throbbing chest, but whatever. And like even this tree is stop swaying, and then it just goes away. And I'm like, that's not creepy at all. Like, does that have to do with like it being the blood forest and there's a god entombed in there? Like, who knows? But Reaver wakes up and tells her to go to bed, like literally just like points her away and says, like, nah, go, you're done. And in true Poppy fashion, she's back to pacing outside the tent. She's thinking about having to feed and how she knows that's what's coming up. And she's thinking about like Castile's feeding and how it felt with him. Will it feel that way this time? Then she starts thinking, did Castile have the same kind of visceral reaction when he fed from other Atlanteans like Nail and Emil? And she's curious about that for research purposes, she says.
Sure.
It's a research that I want to be involved in. Um, But she goes into the tent and tells Kieran how she's feeling, and she's very much like flinging herself onto her thing. She feels awkward about this. This isn't something she's used to. And he's like, "You're being cute." And she says, "There's nothing cute about needing to drink my friend's blood, someone who also happens to be my advisor and my husband's best friend. It's awkward." Um, and he tells her that he's proud of her for coming to him. And he says, "It's a compliment. I wish you had this much trouble asking me to entomb you."
Yeah,
It's like,
well,
true,
beggars can't be choosers, Kieran.
right? Um, but he says, "I know you'd rather feed from Cass, and I wish he was here for a multitude of reasons, but he's not, and you need to feed. Not just for Cass. He'll need you when you free him, of course, but more importantly for yourself." And so he's like,
Mm,
"Okay, let's do this." He
who
says, "I can do
prioritizes themselves? Really?
it." Not us. That's why we love Kieran. He's a mother henning real hard out here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we love it. And he like reassures her that, like, look, whatever you feel during this, it doesn't matter. Like, what does is that you know that it's natural. There's no shame, no judgment. I'm your safe place, basically. Um, so you know you need it. And so she's like, yeah, okay, fine. He cuts his he makes an opening on his arm, and she realizes that his imprint is also what his blood smells like. That earthy, woodsy, rich smell. Um, this one cracks me up. She's doing it. He says, "You need to drink, not sip. That's what you're doing." And I'm trying to imagine like sipping versus when it's something like that. Like those things play into my head. I'm like,
Is it like through a
yeah,
straw or like is it just like a,
mm-hmm.
you know? It's fine.
Exactly. And while she's feeding, she is seeing some of his memories, like them fishing in the lake when they're younger. But then a more interesting memory comes up of the bonfire. If you guys remember the from book 2. Was it book 2? Book 3?
Hmm.
I don't
Previous
remember. One
book.
previous book when they're at the wedding and we learn that the Wolven are very open about stuff.
Mhm.
Um but he essentially, she says, "Kieran, he hadn't just seen me watching him and Lyra, he'd watched." And she could like feel the arousal in her senses. Um and she could like feel how the memory felt. And and essentially like Kieran's like, "You're so nosy." Like he knows what she's looking at. And I'm like, can you blame her? Can you blame her? And then they
Yeah.
talk about it afterwards, and she's like, why did I see that?" And he's like, "Oh, I just wanted to see how you'd react, so I thought of it," basically. And he's like, "And the thing is like, I think you were shocked. I think you were intrigued." And and he's like, "You're not gonna acknowledge that I said about you being intrigued?" And she said, "Nope." And he said, "You're gonna pretend you don't know I was watching the both of you and that you and Casto were watching us?" And she says, "Yep." And then she's like ignoring that and going to sleep. She's like, "We're not going to talk about this," just ignoring it. Good night.
Mood.
Mood. And then chapter 22, Reaver is finally giving them something. Man, it took
Mm.
22 chapters, but he's giving them something. He's telling them how a little bit about the history and how Solus used to be called lasagna.
Lasagna.
It's not lasagna, but lasagna, as Kieran calls it, and he did not like it. Lasagna. He gives the pronunciation right there. Lasagna. He like sounded like lasagna to me, but he says, "I didn't enter the mortal realm often." Sorry, one sec. He says, "I didn't enter the mortal realm often, only a few times, only when necessary. But I think it was a lot like this, like Solus. It's where the consort was born. She was once the princess, the true heir." And they're like, "What? She was mortal?" He said she was born with. Oh yeah, well, she's like, "How can you be?" She's like, she was partly mortal, and she's like, "How can you be partly mortal?" And he goes, just like you were partly mortal. And she's like, oh yeah, whoops. Um, but he tells them she was born with an ember of the primal of life in her. And it wasn't just like what the third sons and daughter has, it was like a pure power. It was the true stuff. It was the good stuff, not the knockoff stuff. Um, so that's kind of
Oh,
crazy, like learning that. And he could have told them more, but
he
he's
didn't.
Reaver. But then there's a larger group ahead of them. It's not like huntsmen, they note soldiers. Kieran covers them, her and him, in mud, trying to cover up her scars. But unfortunately, the mud can cover up the scars, but it can't cover up that glow in the eyes that she's got going on. So they learn really quickly who she is, and she kills the one dude because she's mad that he snapped in her face to get her to look at him, which
True.
honestly I don't blame her. I would have killed him for that too. um but a fight breaks out, and shit's going to hell. Reaver wants barbecue. He wants to smoke all these guys, and she won't let him because she doesn't want to alert anyone to who is with them. um and then our queen got hit with an arrow, and it wasn't just any regular arrow, it was a shadow stone arrow, and that made
Because
her really mad.
why would it be a normal arrow?
Yeah.
It's fine.
It's never normal, it's never. But she goes all godlike, and like she's like, she just feels like death, and she kills a bunch of them. Like she's literally walking through and they're just dropping as she walks past them. But then she hears someone say, that's enough, and it's Millie. She's there. And she's like, we meet again. But she's not alone. She's never alone, let's be honest. But
True.
they came for her, and she says, like, you need to calm down, because if you somehow in the likely event make it past us, she will know and she will kill him. She'll tell you she didn't want to, and part of her will be speaking the truth because she knows what that will do, what pain it will cause you. And she's like, I'm not a fool to believe that she cares about the pain and she inflicts. And she says, what you believe is irrelevant. All that matters is that she believes it. And that's not all that matters. Her killing him does too, doesn't it? Um, and she's kind of like, fine, 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 calms down. They realize that they were expecting them to come anyways. Um, the queen expected them to come one way, but Millie's like, I didn't. I expected you to go through the tunnels because that's what I would do. And
Hmm.
that's kind of like unnerving to them. They're like, I don't like that she knew that.
True.
But and she says she knows what I will do if she kills him. She wouldn't dare. And Millie says, but she would. I am her favorite after you. And it's like, huh? Interesting. Interesting.
I
But
mean,
yeah. But they're also noticing some differences between the other revenants and her. She tells them that they stink, and they're like, that's rude. But she looks at Millie and she's like, but you don't. And she just goes, I don't. And it's like, something's weird though.
true.
Uh and she tells her that basically, like, you're out of choices. You gotta come with us. You wouldn't get to the capital. She says, you're out of choices, Queen of Flesh and Fire. If you're smart as I hope, I would think you'd realize that you won't get into the capital unnoticed, not through the mines or the gates. And Poppy zeroes in on the fact that she says she wouldn't get in, not that she wouldn't escape. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, interesting. And then Reaver says, Queen of Flesh and Fire, if you want the Queen of Flesh and Fire, the bringer of life and death, to accompany you to the capital, then you allow her advisors and me to travel with her. And just him using that title, that's like, oh, go Reaver. I love it. There's just something about it. And she says she doesn't care. You're not prisoners, you're guests. And I'm like, yeah, that's what you want us to believe. It's pouring rain now. But that's not how that works. But she agrees, she realizes there's no other way she can do this. But then she gets like the sudden rush of dizziness, followed by a sharp rise of nausea. She twists away from Kieran, half afraid she might vomit. and
Hmm.
then she remembers the shadow stone, and like she sees that people are talking, she can't hear what's being said, she couldn't hear anything, her heart lurched, and then her legs went out from under her, and then there was nothing.
And then we go into chapter 23. We love that. And then we're reminiscing back to Poppy's memory dream situation. Um, and it ends with someone else was with me in the void. They drew closer, a different kind of darkness before they spoke. What a powerful little flower you are. What a powerful poppy. Pick it and watch it bleed. Not so powerful any longer.
I have so many theories after reading that, but I can't talk with you on them here because it's so like spoilery.
Um, Poppy wakes up 2 days in her old room in Wayfair Castle, learning that the Shadow Stone was coated with a toxin that could have killed anyone else. And this is where we learn Millicent's name is Millicent. And then Kieran gave her more blood. Reaver is in a different room, but Kieran refused to be anywhere but with her. Um, and then they're introduced to Golden Boy, aka Callum. He's a revenant, and there's something really off about him. You have no idea. Um, and then they're talking about like Delano and like how far the Notum can like reach and how far she can talk to him. And she says if he gets close enough to the borders of the capital, um, she'd be able to reach him mentally. And uh sometime later sometime later, she stands blank eyes staring at me from shiny porcelain faces neatly lined up along the shelves on one side of the wardrobe, and Kieran goes, "Please close that door," and she goes, "Scared of dolls?" And he's like, "More like I'm scared of those dolls stealing my soul."
Same, man.
Honestly.
Same.
Um, and he's like asking, "Did you actually play with these as a child?" And she's like, "I did. Isabeth used to give me one every year on the first day of summer until they sent me to Macedonia. I used to think they were beautiful." And he says they're terrifying, and she says, "Yeah, but their faces were smooth and flawless. Mine obviously wasn't, so I pretended I looked like them." And that's
Hmm.
real tragic.
Depressing as hell.
Um, and then Millie comes back and says that New Haven and Whitebridge are under Atlantean control and they expect three rivers to be seized at any moment. And then she gives Poppy clothes to wear and it's white and Poppy's like, "Hell nah, bitch, I ain't wearing this shit." Um, I don't care what the queen wants, like she'll never see me in white ever again. Um, and Poppy tells Millicent, "I need you to understand something. If she wants me to come to her, you will find me clothing that is not white, or I will go to her as I am." And Millie's like, would almost be worth letting you do just to see the look on her face." Um, and Millicent says, "Poppy wasn't always this assertive and demanding because I remember you when you were as quiet as a tiny mouse, not making a single sound unless it was night and bad dreams found you in your sleep. Interesting. I was there then. I feel like I've always been there. I'm old, Penelope, almost as old as your king." Um, and she says, "I suggest you get out of my face, get your face ready, and do it quickly. Time is of the essence, your highness." And Poppy goes, "I'm not afraid of her. I'm a queen. I'm a god. I'm not afraid of her. I couldn't be." And then she has like an internal, like, "I couldn't be afraid of her. I couldn't be afraid of anything. Not now." And she's kind of just self-talking her through. And then our big three that's not like our threesome.
Not the big three.
Not our threesome, but our big three like LeBron, Dwayne,
The
and
big three on the rescue mission.
Josh. Yeah. Um, Back together in the Great Hall, and we see Malik. Oh my god, my brain. Malik? Is
Malik.
this okay?
This one's a
Okay.
Malik.
Malik is spelled Malik, and Malik is spelled Malik. I just want to let
Mhm.
everyone know that this is very backwards. Um, Anyway, uh, my head cut to her. She was looking at Malik. Close as we stood, I saw tiny spots across her cheeks beneath the painted mask. Freckles. I squeezed Kieran's hand. She watched the prince much like he'd watched her in Oak Ambler, jaw tight and motionless. And Reaver says that is not a statue of Nyktos, and Millicent agrees. Um, well, Prince Malik, your brother-in-law. Sorry. Um,
The roast.
And then
but
they're
not.
watching the queen say, "My people, how you honor me," and Poppy's insides went cold at the soft warm tone that was so at odds with her special brand of cruelty. "How you humble me, even in times of such uncertainty and fear, your faith in me has never wavered." And Kieran slowly turns his head to me, and Poppy goes, "I know." And she goes, "And for that I will not waver, and neither will the gods, not in the face of a godless kingdom or the Harbinger." I actually don't like the name Harbinger. Anyway,
Me neither.
chapter 24. The harbinger and bringer of death and destruction to the lands gifted by the gods has awakened, the Blood Queen said. And then Poppy is like pissed. She's like, "I'm not the harbinger." And she sends a pointed glance and says, "You're not." And Poppy's going all earthquakey. And Isbitch is giving royal blessings, and she says mortals believe that the touch of a royal has healing properties. She tells Kieran, "I remember them lining up for days to get a chance to receive the blessing," and Millicent says that she still does. Um, and the Blood Queen knows where they are, and she kind of just looks at them in their little alcove, and I'm just like, I hate you so much. And um so they're staring, and Poppy goes, "They stare because they find you too appealing to look upon. They stare at me because I'm flawed and they cannot figure out why would be among them."
I
Um,
love how much Reaver hates that.
Honestly, same, considering one, how old school he is, and just kind of like he doesn't have a really good social filter in a general sense, but like he recognizes how fucked up that is.
Yeah.
Um,
He even says that's the stupidest goddamn thing I've heard in a while, and I've heard a lot of stupid.
yep. And um she's just getting angry. And she anger pulsed so furiously through me that I truly believed I deserved some sort of recognition for not unleashing my rage right there. And honestly, same girl. And Isbitch comes into the room and she's like, "What you wear isn't befitting of a queen." And Poppy's like, "What I wear will be my choice. What befits a queen, I will decide."
Yeah.
Just like, all right, pop out, girlfriend. Um, and Poppy just calls everything fake, fake just like the blessing, just like the right and everything that makes up the blood crown, fake just like the god you believe you are. Um, and I fucking hate Callum. He's such a fucking piece of poo.
Hmm.
Um, and so Malik's gaze snaps to hers, and that lazy smile of his froze. She didn't stop herself. I sank into the ether, into those mental walls, digging in with claws, into those tiny slithers of weakness. Blood drained rapidly from the prince's face as I tore those fissures wide. She's like trying to read his emotions. Um, and she catches the sugary residue of fleeting amusement and pooling acidic anger. Malik shuddered, bending at the waist as his fingers dug into his hair. The handmaiden stepped in, blocking him from view of others as I continued to pull his emotions from him. I tasted hints of sourness and tart tanginess, equal parts shame and sorrow, but it was the dagger-sharp bitterness that overpowered everything else, fear that had grown into an ever-present panic. And Isbitch is like, "I carried you in the womb and cared for you. That is why I tolerate from you what I would not allow from others." Callum is just shiny. Uh, and she demands to essentially see Castile. And so she's blindfolded and she's taken to see Castile with Isbitch, Golden Boy, and weird, crazy sister she doesn't know exists.
You,
Um,
you didn't want to use the nicknames.
no. Uh, And she Isbitch goes, "I promise the safety of your men. How you behave next will determine whether or not that promise is kept." And then she finally spots Castile, and her heart cracks under the weight of what she saw.
Oh, chapter 25. So, yeah. So she sees Castile, and all she can see is like, she doesn't even see him. He's basically an animal at this point. He's
Poor guy.
growling. You can see his fangs, things like that. She sees the chains that are holding him and that they're the bones of deities, and she knows that they're not there to keep him because that has no effect on him. They're there to keep someone like her from being able
Mm-hmm.
to break them.
Correct.
Which honestly, smart thinking on their point, but stupid
Rude.
people. Shadowstone shackles encircled his ankles, wrists, and his throat. His throat, his actual fucking throat. Oh, I don't think she likes that.
I don't think so either.
His skin was covered in thin, angry red lines from all the times they've cut into him to drain his blood from him. The cloth along his right calf had been torn and bleeding. She can tell there's craven bites, bandages on his left hand, and she realized that she wasn't truly ready to see what had been done to him. Um, and that when he looked at her, she could barely see any gold. Like they were almost completely black, which means he's like going into full blown bloodlust soon. Um, and I'm surprised she didn't go all God right there, honestly, seeing that. Like she's holding I think she's holding it pretty good right now. She wanted to scream, but she's holding it in. She wants to burn the realm, but she's like, nope, I got this. And Callum, the ass he is like, I wouldn't stand too close to him. He's like a rabid animal. And she says, I will make sure you die and it will hurt. And he goes, he said the same thing. And she said, then I'll make sure he has the pleasure of witnessing it. And he calls her giving for that. And I'm just like, you're an asshole. And then she goes like right in there. She doesn't hesitate. She finds her way in there, knowing him, is able to get a hold of him and heals him all the wounds and everything, which kind of phases him out of that bloodlust. Like he's still on the edge, but he's not teetering off of it like he was before. His eyes are gold again. It was able to like reel it in a little bit. You're about to slip out of it, but I have a good hold now. But his eyes were gold and he says, Poppy. And then it switches to Castiel's point of view. And he's in disbelief that she's here. Like he's holding him, touching her, and he says, Poppy was God's. She was grounding in a way only she could be. Her mere presence gathered all those fragmented shards that had broken off and floated away, piercing them back together once again. But then realization set in real quick, and he realized that Callum was there, Millie was there. He realized this isn't a dream. Like this is real. She's here, and it's not a rescue mission like he had thought it would be. It says my entire body went cold. This was no rescue. I tightened my arm around Poppy's waist, shifting us as best I could with the damn chains. I can't imagine him doing that with like his like it's his neck caught, but it's chained to the wall. It has to be so he can move his head and stuff. Because part of me always imagined it's like to the wall, but that doesn't make sense. I was being stupid. Ignore me. But he says I could only get her body halfway shielded by mine. And I love that even when he's in distress, he still worries about like protecting her. And it's cute. And she reassures him, saying that like it's okay. Kieran and Reaver are with me, they're safe. He remembers who Reaver is. And he's like, have they hurt you? And Callum's like, does she look like she's been harmed? And he's like, does it look like I'm talking to you? And he's like, your queen must be made of magic, considering that the last time I saw you, all you could do was foam at the mouth. And Poppy looks at him and said, I changed my mind. I will kill you the first chance I get.
Mood.
Very much a mood. And the queen comes in and right when the queen comes in, she just adds stupidness on top of the situation. She's being like, I fed him, I gave him bath and stuff like that, and it's like, no, you didn't. No, you did not. I mean, you did, but not enough to actually take care of him. And she was going to go feed him, and the stupid queen, she goes, I did not give you permission to bleed for him. And Poppy says, I don't need your permission. And I'm like, damn straight you don't. Like, this queen pisses me off to no end. But she's like mad at him. She's like, you're holding a king here. Like, the man your daughter is to marry. Like, you say you're doing this all for me, but you're doing all this shit. But then Castiel's like, no, I can't have you down here. I don't want to weaken you. You can't feed me. And she's kind of mad. She's like, you've you have him chained and starved. You have hurt him and kept him in place, not fit for even a craven, yet you say he is well. Why would he? And she's like, oh, he didn't show respect. And she says, why would he when dealing with someone unworthy of respect? And it's like, please pop off more. Like, and obviously we know Castiel, he likes it when she gets like that. And he said, from the first time I saw you knock an arrow and fire without hesitation, handle a dagger and fight beside another, fight me, I was in awe. I'm never not in awe of you. I'm always utterly mesmerized. Even I'll never stop being that, always and forever. And I'm just like, oh, always and forever. And then it goes back to Poppy. She went back out to talk to the bitch about the plans. And she's just reeling, and she are talking about her mom. And she's saying that like she hid her eyes from Poppy using borrowed magic because apparently the revenant's eyes scared her as a kid. And can't understand why, but so her mother didn't have the brown eyes that she expected. She says, what I did may have guided your actions, but it was still your hand. You're not absolved of responsibility, Isbeth, just like how what happened to your son doesn't justify all you've done since. Which is like very true. Like she's telling it to her straight, like, look, I get it, shit happened to you, but that doesn't justify what you're doing to other people.
Mood.
And
That before.
Right? It's like the theme of her life. And Callum's being stupid, thinking, do you think he deserves food and water? Or do you really think do you think you deserve that? Better yet, do you really think he does? And she's had enough of him, so she like straight up turns, takes his blade and shoves it into his chest. And she goes, I wasn't speaking to you. And he dies, and she's like, you stabbed my revenant. And she's like, he'll be fine, won't he? I mean, honestly, we're fine if he doesn't. But then she tells her that she has a memory of seeing her dad in the cage, not knowing it's her dad, but she's told that she actually has her father's eyes.
I love that.
Not her mother's like she thought, but her father's.
Well, good. No one wants. Well, let it's fine. It's fine.
Is it though? Is it?
No. But chapter 26.
Yes. Sorry, I was like, did I do 2 chapters already? My mind just went blank. So she's very thrown off by this. Like, what do you mean? And she said, when he would get angry, the essence would become more visible. It would swirl through his eyes, much like what it does to Poppy's. And we get finally we get some history of like how her father came here and what happened. Because this whole time Poppy's been thinking you captured him and basically assaulted him to get what you wanted, to have me. And so that's what she's been thinking this whole time. And she says he came to me almost 200 years after the war had ended. He was looking for his brother, and the only one who came with him could sense Malik's blood and led him to me. And we realize that's the Draken, and she's like, huh, I didn't think you would know that. No one, like hardly anyone knew that a Draken came with him. And she says, where's the Draken? And she says, the Draken has been dealt with. And she knows what that means. To her, that means the Draken is dead. I have doubts. I do not think she is dead. Anyways, that is me.
Find out that that's not the case at the end of the book.
Oh yeah, that's true. Listen, I haven't finished my reread yet, okay? I am behind. But she realizes, like, obviously she doesn't care about it. But she learns that he was there, and that like he looks like his brother, and so she kind of wanted to see if she could replace him with Malik and just think he's Malik, which is really disgusting in its own thought. Um, but she says I didn't force myself upon him. He was intrigued by the world. He never interacted with mortals, even though he was born in this world. Um, and she was married when she was doing this stuff with him, and she's like, so like, what do I care? But then he wanted to return, and she was not ready to let him go, and she couldn't let him go. He was angry, apparently, but she says when we came together to make you, he was not forced, neither time.
Hmm.
Interesting. And she
Hmm.
says, I can't blame you for not believing me. It was not an act of love, not one, not on either of our parts. For me, it was necessary. I wanted a child, a strong one. I knew what you would be. For him, it was just lust and hatred. Those two emotions aren't very different from one another. Once there's nothing but once there's nothing but flesh between you two. Perhaps it will please you to know that he tried to kill me afterwards.
Kind of does.
Doesn't please her, but pleases me a little bit. And she says, I used to wonder why it took Iris so long to look for his brother. Maybe because Iris slept so deeply, but Malik didn't die all those years ago like I believe, did he? That bitch entombed him. Now I know that he must have been conscious up to that point. 200 years, Penelope, and then he must have slipped away as close to death as he could get for it to it then wake Iris. That's intense. That's intense to know that he was that way for 2 years before it finally was enough for his twin to wake up. He deserved it though,
200?
so it's okay. 200, yeah. Whatever. Um she said she was talking about how she tells him they're talking about them being heartmates and like how did you not know he was already dead? And she's basically saying whatever happened to him being entombed, like it wasn't something that I could feel because he wasn't dead and they didn't have the imprint or anything like that. And then she realizes that if she had chosen to see her father, she wouldn't have let her. And it says, and she says, why haven't you let him return to Elysium? Why do you need him, basically? And she says, other than the fact that he would be sure to return once he regained his strength, when he couldn't be so easily subdued, I need him to make my revenants. And she said, you needed a god to ascend the third sons and daughters, and you already had knowledge of Colus's essence and how to use it thanks to Malik. And she's very shocked that she knows who Colus is.
Same.
And I said, mommy bitch didn't expect the K word to come up. And then she's asking about the marks around them, and she says they're a safeguard of sorts. They keep things in or keep things out. And that doesn't sound good ever. Back to Castile. We're going back and forth a lot, but back to Castile. He's thinking about how Poppy was there. He's like in a frenzy now to get out because he knows he's there. He's worried about her. He wants to get out. So he's trying to break the chains, but Millie comes in doing Millie things. And she starts like dunking her head in his bathwater because she's like, you're not using this. You mind if I do? And she does. And the water turns black. Like immediately. There's like dye running down her face. And we realize that her hair is not black. It is a shade of blonde so pale it was nearly white. Wonder who has hair like that. Anyways, it says the hair wasn't the right color. The curls, and she washes her face off too. The hair wasn't the right color. The curls were tighter, but the face was the same oval shape. The mouth full and wide. She had the same strong brow. I saw freckles over the bridge of her nose and all over her cheeks, much more prominent and plentiful. The way she now looked back at me with a slight tilt of a stubborn jaw. Good gods, all of it was familiar. Too familiar. And she says, do I remind you of someone? And he's thinking it's impossible. But then she says, I'm the first daughter. I was never meant to be, neither was the second, but that's neither here nor there at the moment. I prefer to be called by my actual name, Millicent or Millie, either works. And he says, like, you're her sister, aren't you? Like her full blood sister. Iris is your father. And she says, I am. And he says, you're a goddess. And she says, I'm no god. What I am is a failure. Um, I can't imagine the life she had. That's all I'm gonna say. Like, oh, she had like she remembers he remembers Malik saying like she has very little choice. And he knows Malik knows who she is. But she basically says that like she wants revenge against everything. She doesn't want to remake the kingdoms, it's the realms. Like she wants Atlantia, Solus, but she also wants Elysium. And um he says, remember, our mother isn't strong enough to do such a thing, like remake the realms, but she created something that was Penelope. And she says, it's the truth. Like, I wish it wasn't, because I know that no matter what I do, what anyone does, the queen will succeed because you will also fail. And he says, fail at what? And she says, at killing my sister. She talks about how she's going to complete the culling soon. And then it ends with her saying, then her love for you will become one of the very, very few weaknesses she will have. You will be the only thing that can stop her then. If you don't, Penelope will help end the realms as we know them, causing millions to lose their lives and subjecting those who survive to something far worse. Either way, my sister can't survive this. She will die in your arms or she will drown the realms in blood.
It's kind of dark, Millie, but like I respect it, I guess.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
and then chapter 27, we go back to Poppy's point of view, and
Back and
she's
forth, back and
pacing as she always, is. And so they keep trying to put her in white. Then she destroys the white clothes, like fuck that shit. Um,
forth. Should I know?
and she's talking, she's kind of just uh she using she Kieran's imprint reaches her and he's like Liesa and she's like don't call me that and he goes my queen instead and she sighs, she's like how about neither. So he asks what's going on and she goes we need to get out of here. So they're talking about their plan and she's just feeling really guilty about the potential lives lost and Kieran goes we can't save everyone but we can save the ones we love, and I think that that's really powerful. um and Then Poppy goes into this realization phase of Malik caring for Millicent and how Malik will do anything to protect her. And because she like eggs him on, she's like, what if like maybe I'll just ask the Blood Queen if she thinks you're here for her handmaiden, and Malik's like, ask her that, and I will wrap you in the bones of a deity and throw you into the god's damn shroud sea. And she's like, that's a bit excessive for a threat. Honestly, mood. And then like she
Very
goes to
telling though
meet
for a threat.
honestly. And then she goes to talk to Isbitch, and I just think Isbitch's mentality is wild. Um and like they're kind of talk honestly, it seems like natural selection is kind of the mentality she has. And she makes a
Yeah.
comment that they'll be turned into creatures who will then prey upon others with little remorse, or they will cull the weak from the masses. And she tells Poppy that I never really had any intention of ruling Atlantia. I don't need the kingdom. I don't even want it. I just want to see it burn. Ended. I want to see every Atlantean dead. And like that's so bitter of her, but like that doesn't surprise me.
And that's very different from what we knew before now, because we thought she wanted to capture Atlantia and rule over it. Like that's
And
what
she
she'd
just
been
wants to destroy
spewing.
it.
Yeah, she's
Yeah.
like, no, I want all of them gone. Like,
She's like, me. And then we switch back into Castiel's point of view, where he is remembering what Millie said about she will die in your arms. And that cycles through his brain. Um, and him and Callum have a back and forth about arrogance and how Poppy stabbed Callum with his own dagger, and he Cass makes this comment about that's my girl, and Callum says, "You must be very proud of her. We'll see how that changes." And Cass goes, "It'll never change no matter what." And Callum makes a comment that says, "Love, such a strange emotion. I've seen it take the most powerful beings down. I've seen it give others unbelievable strength. But out of all the many, many years I've lived, I've only seen love stop death once." And Callum said, "Nyctos and his consort." And um Callum mentions how he's old enough to remember the way things used to be, old enough to know when love is a strength or a weakness. And he says that it's a weakness for Cass. Um, and Cass is like, "You know how?" Or um, Callum says, "You know how?" And Cass is like, "I bet you're gonna tell me." And Callum goes, "You should have fed from her when you had the chance. You're going to regret not doing that." And then pain explodes in his chest, and Callum, pieces of shit, uh, stabs him. Cass looks down to see a dagger deep in the center of his chest and red everywhere, coursing down his stomach. "I lifted my head, biting out, missed my heart, dumbass." And Callum goes, "I know." The Rev smiled, yanking the dagger free. "Tell me, Your Majesty, what happens to an Atlantean when there's no more blood coursing through their veins?" The wound felt like it was on fire, but my insides were drenched in ice. My heart gave a sluggish lurch. Bloodlust, complete and absolute. That's what happened. I hear it makes one as monstrous as a craven. Rising, he lifted the dagger to his mouth and ran his tongue along the blood-soaked blade. Good luck. That's disgusting, Callum.
That's so disgusting.
Ew.
Like, hey.
And then we go into chapter 28, back to Poppy's point of view. We learn that Isbeth blames Nyctos for literally everything. She says Nyctos appreciates all manner of life, but he is particularly fond of the Atlanteans. Their creation was a result of the heartmate trials, the product of love. Malik once told me his father even saw the Atlanteans as his children. Their loss will deliver the kind of justice I seek. And this whole chapter is really just them going back and forth, and it's honestly annoying. And Poppy remembers the voice in her head saying, "All you will liberate is death." And to spite Isbitch, Poppy, because they kind of do like a power trip, power struggle, whatever, back and forth. And Poppy shatters the glass that the Blood Queen held, reminding her that she's not afraid, and she's no longer the submissive maiden that's sat next to her. And she decides that they need to get out and move tonight.
Yeah.
So what does she do? She
I think it's
summons the mist.
yeah. I think it's also important to note that it's not really in the show notes. Oh no, it is. Sorry, I was too far down. I'm dumb. Okay. It was Nyctos that she blamed Nyctos, but it was there. I had it scrolled too far down. I was like, why is it not there? Anyways.
Last two chapters. Woo!
Woo! Fight their way out. So yeah, so this chapter, the beginning of it is basically about she summons the mist. And now it's time to get out and fight their way out. She melts the lock because she's a big bad bitch. And they're fighting. They're fighting the revenants, the guards, fighting their way out. She meets up with Kieran, and he's kind of like, did you do that, the mist? And she's like, yeah, I mean, I just willed it and it happened. And he says, I know of only two things that can do that: the Craven and primals. And she says, well, now you know of three things. And I'm like, honey, Reaver really should have corrected them. You're correct. He really should have. Um, but they meet up and they're like, we got to hurry. We got to get out of here. And they get Reaver. He's drenched in blood. Like, it's just, you could tell he had fun. And he says, sorry, I'm a messy eater.
Mood.
Same, right? Like, get food everywhere on me. But he's like, it's about damn time we're making our move, Reaper said. I was beginning to wonder if we're gonna move in. And they're like, okay, we just gotta get going. They're kind of planning out, this is what's gonna be here. Everything's gonna happen. We got the big three, and they're going through the tunnels trying to find him. I believe they're in Nyctos's temple, aren't they?
Primal Temple.
the primal temple, and she's like, "Did he ever sit on here?" And he said, "Only for a brief time." And they're like, "Why is there only one? Why is there only one, guys?" Um, and they're like, "What's going on? Why are things acting the way they are?" And Reaver says, "You carry the blood of the primal in you, and you're in the primal's temple. It's reacting to your presence. It's left here." And honestly, that's kind of like a big sign right there of like, do you know what you are, honey?
No.
Yeah. And they're joking around being like, "Oh, so very special." And they're wondering if the spell will work. And they're like, "Okay, this is where we're going to use it." But before they can, Malik shows up. And they're not really trusting of him, but he's like, "Look, you're not going to get to cast without me. I get it. You don't trust me, but if you want any hope of getting to him, let's go." And so it's kind of like, "Oh, what's going on? He's helping them." Like, and
Wild.
they're like, "How convenient of you to show up and be so helpful." And he's like, "It's not, it's a huge ass risk I'm doing. You can sense my emotions. You can tell I'm not here to trick you." And she's like, "Well, that's not really how that works." But he's like, "You know what? Let's go." And Reaver's like, "We don't have time for this. Either kill him or make sure he can't betray us." And he says, "It's her. You're right. I'm here because of her." Like, he's giving them his Hail Mary of like, "This is how I need you to trust me." And she said she tasted tangy, almost bitter anguish. It was powerful, but what cut through it was sweet, reminding me of chocolate and berries. And he said that, and she realized it's Millicent. And he said, nearly everything I've done is for her. She's my heartmate."
Dun dun
Dun, dun,
dun.
dun. Anyways, so they go on, and she says, "Making up my mind, I step forward. I believe you. That doesn't mean I trust you. Show us where Castile is. But if you betray us, I will kill you myself." And so, chapter 30, they go and find Cass. They realize he's been stabbed because Callum is a POS times two. He's unrecognizable. He's gone into bloodlust, and it's not good. Like, this is not in a good spot. And Poppy's just like, "I want him dead." And Reaver's like, "Noted, got it. We'll take care of that." Um, Kieran says he needs to feed, but he doesn't recognize you, Poppy. He will hurt you. I can't understand. I can't stand here and allow that. I don't want to see that happen to you. I don't want to see how it will fucking destroy him when he comes out of the bloodlust and realize what he's done. And they're like, "What he needs is help, though." And like, he's like, "Yeah, he needs it. He needs to pull out the bloodlust. He may need to feed multiple times to get back to normal, but we don't have time for that here. We got to get him out of here to do that, because it's gonna be real quick before people realize you're missing. We gotta go." And he says, "I know of a place. If we can get him there, it'll be good for at least a day or two." And everyone's like, "You know a place we can hide him? Why should we trust you?" But there's no time to think about that. They basically knock him out, poor Cass, and are taking him out. And then he realizes Reaver's a Draken. And so that's kind of fun. And he says, "He's my brother, and if you want him, you're gonna have to pry him from my dead fingers. I'm carrying him." And Kieran looked as if he wished to do just that, but he relented. "Then where are we going?" He says, "To a friend's." I don't know why I'm coughing so much. So they follow Malik out the tunnels, kind of realize they would never have made it out there themselves. And even Malik's like, even Malik is like, "What were you planning to do? Like, fight your way out?" And they're like, "Well, yeah, that's all we kind of had." And he's like, "I think you would have been caught, even if Cass wasn't in the shape he is. Like, it's not, it wouldn't have worked out." It says, "What do you think happens to mortals and vampires get a bit gluttonous with? Can't let them turn in their homes. They're dumped underground where they turn. Sometimes they get out, when the gods are angry, of course. A sizable tithe to the temples helps assuage that anger enough for the craven to be dealt with." Don't we love that? How they use that weapon to their liking.
Hmm.
It's just so nice of them. But they're kind of in a residential area on the outskirts of the town. And he uses a name that's not his name for them. They call him yeah,
Alien? Oh,
Elian, something like that,
pronunciation again.
which is basically his middle name. And he introduces them to Blaz and Clarissa. There in the Stonehill was a district somewhere between Cross and the Shroud Sea, where those who had a little coin but not a lot called home. To show them like who they are, she goes to show him her scars, but Kieran says it's not the scars, it's your eyes. They're streaked with silver, been that way since you entered the stairwell in the Wayfair. So basically, her eyes are glowing even more. And they're in this house. These people trust him. They've worked together. So it shows that like Malik is kind of like a little double agent thing going on. Like now it's really like, where is he standing in all this? But they're in the room like fighting about everything. And he says, you should all leave. Or Kieran says, you should all leave. He's about to wake.
Which seems like a perfect end to this episode. So, parts 1 and 2. If you're listening to this, you've already listened to part 1, I hope, but maybe you're listening to part 2 first. I don't know why you would do that. But next week, parts 3 and 4 will be out for the rest of the book. And Sippin and Bitchin on everything, and we'll provide you updates there. But we'll catch you later, bitches, and we'll see you next
Love
week.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Get your honeydew.
Or that.